Thank you, Chair Lisa. It's good to see many of your faces, and even with the face-to-face meeting, it's sometimes hard to see all the faces. So it's wonderful to see so many faces tonight. Now, I just want to give you a bit about the time frame that we have tonight. So I'll do a short presentation, roughly about 30 minutes. And then, I'll leave about 5 to 10 minutes for you to make comments or ask questions. And then we'll be divided into different groups to have a further discussion. And then we'll come back. So that is basically the time frame that we have tonight. When I was 13 years old, my junior high school teacher who taught us Chinese language encouraged me to compete in public speaking. Now, I grew up in Hong Kong, and back in those days, when a teacher encourages you to do something, and it's not just an encouragement, it's a mandate. So there I went. I still remember on the day I was standing on the stage and looking down the audience, schoolmates and teachers. There was a panel of judges. And then I realized my teacher just happened to be sitting on the panel. Then I gave my virgin speech. And of course, I didn't win the competition. But afterwards, my teacher pulled me aside and said this to me. Sunny, you know what? Your legs were shaking so violently that they drew people's attention away from your speech. What a pity. So that's the first lesson I learned about public speaking. If you can't control your legs, hide them. Now, since then, I've done numerous public speaking and debate, and I can tell you the nerve always gets to me. So if there's a lectern in front of me, I'll try to stand behind it, just not allowing people to see my legs. But if there's no lectern, I would imagine my two legs are like 2 tree stumps firmly planted on the ground. But then friends of mine would laugh at me saying, Sunny, don't kid yourself. Those are no stumps. They are frozen legs, and it's called paralysis. Now, seriously, well, I'll do the technical, right? That wasn't really the first lesson I learned. First feedback about public speaking, because later on my teacher did have the opportunity to teach me a lot about public speaking and debate. And the very first lesson he taught me was this. He said, whenever you engage a topic like a debate or speech, remember this, you have to do this first. Try to define the key words in the topic, because even everyone reads the same topic and the same words, but to different people, they could mean different things. So I think tonight, when I'm going to talk about the topic, the church admission, I want to start off giving you a definition. Now, it's not the best definition, not the most accurate one, but just one angle, providing a platform so I could later on launch my key presentation tonight. So what I'm going to do now is to share screen so that you could see the presentation. Now, I hope everyone could see the screen, that you could see the topic. It's called the church admission. Now, many of you know that I'm very interested in ancient language. And so tonight, I want to use the angle about language, etymology in particular, to try to give you a bit of definition about this topic, the church admission. First of all, the word church. Now, I discovered that the word church actually came from an Old English, "sirs," and it actually was developed from a medieval Greek, kurikon, literally means the house of the Lord, the Lord's house. You can see, the meaning is quite close to what we understand the church today, the house of the Lord. But as some of you would know, the word church in English was employed or has been employed by translators to translate a New Testament word in the Bible. And the word is ecclesia, ecclesia. Now, the word is actually a compound noun. So let me show you the two parts. Ek means out of. Ecclesia actually comes from the verb kaleo, meaning call out of. So the picture is like in the ancient world, someone would use an instrument like a horn or trumpet and to just blow it so that to call people, to gather people together. So the word in the first century didn't carry any religious sense, just assemble people. So you can translate the word assembly. But for God's people, like the Jewish people and the Christians, early Christians, right? The word actually carries some religious sense. It's almost pointing to God calling people out of and gather them. So that's the word, the etymology of the word church. Now, how about the word mission, the church admission? I found out it actually came from an old Latin word. Now, I don't know Latin, so I don't want to pretend I know how to pronounce it. The original word, however you pronounce it, was developed later on into a modern language, missio. And in the 16th century, it finally became the English word mission. But what did it mean initially? Well, interestingly, the meaning of the word in Latin actually says sending, sending. So if we look at our topic today, the definition I provide, just one angle, again, it's not the best angle, just one angle. The church at mission is basically God calling a group of people, assemble them together, and send them out. And then for what? So now I want to use that as a platform because it actually helped me to come to this presentation. But before I start, let me show you two photos. Now, fresh out of uni, I actually became a high school teacher. Believe it or not, I actually taught accounting and commerce. So after teaching for 1 year, I saved up some money. So I decided to join a study tour to go to Israel. Now, the tour, basically, most of us were Christians, and we had two guides. One, a Christian minister. The other one is a local Jewish guide. And I always regarded him as like a quasi-rabbi because you know, his knowledge on biblical stories and background is so immense that I remember during the whole trip, he constantly rolled his eyes because he couldn't withstand how naive and ignorant we were as Christians. Now, back in those days, of course, a long time ago, we didn't have digital camera whatsoever. So I actually took these two photos, all right? And I sort of, you know, used a sticky tape to put them together. What's that? It's actually Lake Galilee. I was on a boat in Lake Galilee. Let me show you the satellite picture of Lake Galilee. It looks like a heart, like a heart. And I show you the triangle here is basically where the boat was. The pointing north is the direction I was taking the photo. Now, when I was taking the photo, you know, on a boat, the two guides, you know, Christian minister and a quasi-rabbi, actually told us to look at the mountain on our left-hand side, which is the one that you see. All right. Now, of course, my photos are not that good. So I want to show you some photos that downloaded from internet. So again, you know, the same mountain. You see, I like a cliff. Once again, there's another photo of the same place, but I think it was taken from the northwest side. Again, the arrow will show you the cliff. All right. And again, another photo, you know, more like a close-up. Now, why they drew our attention to that cliff, the mountain? Because according to tradition, that is basically the place where the story in the book of Matthew ends. In the book of Matthew, the very end bit of the story, Jesus basically summons and calls his disciples after resurrection or ascension. So he calls them together and assemble them, and then later on to send them out. So I think it reminds me of what just the definition I gave you. All right, to call them together, call them out, come together, send them out. And in Matthew 28, we have a very famous passage that many Christians would call the Great Commission. Now it says, "And Jesus came and said to them, 'All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I'm with you always to the end of the age.'" Now, when I was in 4th year in my seminary back in US, studying theology, I was doing advanced Greek grammar. And my professor, Dan Wallace, told us this, you know, he said, "This passage is one of the best, if not the best passages in the New Testament to test the level of understanding of Greek grammar." So if you ask a first-year student, or a first-year student, second year, or third year, or fourth-year student to look at the passage, it will all give you different interpretations because the grammar within the passage is very complex and very nuanced. So tonight, I want to use this passage and share with you what I've learned so that we could have not the best angle, again, just one angle, understanding the church at mission. Now, before I do so, I want to give you a bit of background about the book of Matthew. Now, in today's scholarship, I would say majority of the scholars would argue this, the first audience of the book of Matthew was basically the Jewish community. So it was written for a Jewish community. How so? So I'll give you 2 examples. First, if you look at the very beginning of the book of Matthew, you will see a very long genealogy. In fact, the very first line, it says a record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ. And then the passage would end with this really peculiar description. Thus, there were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to Christ. Now, why so peculiar? Oh, straightforward. No. Now, if you try to look at the passage and genealogy from the modern mathematical perspective, the passage, the conclusion is just wrong. Because from Abraham to David, there are actually 13 generations and 14 names. Now, you may say, Sunny, come on, 14 names, 14 generations. But how about from David till the time of exile? Then we have 14 generations, 15 names. And then again, from exile to Jesus, 13 generations and 14 names. So no matter how you tweak it, it's just not accurate. So why emphasizing on 14? Just wrong. Well, it's not wrong because it's actually, you can say, a way for the ancient author to convey the message. Now, why? Because in the ancient time, ancient Hebrew language didn't have numbers. They didn't have characters for numbers. So this is what they would do. They would gather all the letters, consonants, and assign a number to each letter. And when they want to to quote a letter, they would combine the letters together. So this is how they, did numbers in the ancient time. Now, 14 for us is like nothing, but for ancient Jewish people, it was a very, very important number. Why? Because King David, the name David basically with 3 letters, 3 consonants, Daleth, Wa, and Daleth. And if you combine the letters, each letter represents one number, right? When you add them up together, the number is 14. So it's quite strange for us, like, what's that? But for the ancient people, Jewish people, that's how they perceive that. So it's not about mathematically whether it's accurate or not. It's basically another way to say Jesus really a descendant from David. He's a rightful king for the Jews. So that's the number thing. Next, second example. I hope you are still awake. After dinner, it's so hard to stay in tune. Let me share with you 2 readings or 2 stories in the book of Matthew. Now, you can find the same stories in all the synoptic gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, all the same. The first one is about Jesus calling the 12, send them out. The second one is a Canaanite woman, a Gentile woman, coming to ask Jesus for help because, her daughter has got a demon. But one thing is so strange in Matthew, because if you compare the 2 stories with, say, Mark and Luke, these are the things that never appearing in other gospels. So read it. For example, when Jesus calling the 12, he actually tells the 12, saying, do not take a road leading to Gentiles, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. All right. And then he repeats in the later on the story in 15, repeat the same line. The woman coming, for help, and Jesus say, oh, sorry, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So scholars say it's a kind of exclusivism. Some scholars call bias towards Gentiles. All right, so he really like, don't go to the Gentiles. For ancient Jewish people, they really dislike Gentiles. Some even hated them because of a variety of reasons. So immersion in the story beginning with the genealogy, talking about Jesus, the descendant of David, and now, Gentiles. So I think it would be sweet to the ear of the first audience. It's very sympathetic to the Jewish people. Now, I really want to get to the passage. I have to come to the central point. I want to talk about this passage. I hope you are still awake. Give you a bit of background first. The passages start with this. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but they doubted. And Jesus came and said to them. And now you have the very first line. It says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Now, look at the Greek sentence. It's quite interesting. It's not all authority, it's every authority. And then when you have the word in heaven, or the phrase in heaven and on earth, is actually an ancient metaphor or idiomatic expression. One example, right? I live in an apartment building in a suburb, here in Melbourne. The problem for me is that you can't see from what I'm wearing now, I'm actually a shorts and thong and singlet kind of guy. All right, so that's how I normally, so I have seen a number of United Church people walking down the street, they couldn't recognize me at all because it's very different from how I'm look. This is like a uniform per se. But the problem though, in my apartment building, most of the people, they really dress well. So I remember one day I just went down to get my mail. I was, thongs, flip-flops, shorts and singlet. I remember, another resident, sort of walking past me and she was looking me like, from head to toe. It's like scanning. I felt so embarrassed. Now I want to talk about this because in heaven and on earth is actually what we call the ancient mirrorism. We do have that in our English expression. If people say Sunny from head to toe, not good. It's not about my head nor my toe, it's about a whole person. So both in Hebrew and also in Greek, when you say in heaven and on earth, for example, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. It's not about the heavens nor the earth, it's everything. So it's called ancient mirrorism. So basically, the first line is every authority in all domains was given to me. So that's the idea. Let's soldier on. I hope you're still awake. Then we have this very long thing, which is the center of my presentation today. When my professor said, depending on which year you belong to, your understanding of Greek grammar will have very different kind of understanding of the passage. I want to share with you what I've learned, as I said. The red bit, go, make disciples, baptize, teach, obey, command, are all verbs, actions. But there's one problem though. The whole sentence with so many actions, there's only one main verb, one key action. All the others are subsidiary. So now I really want to venture into something really boring. I hope you could just bear with me, because without understanding that, you can't understand the passage. I want to share with you the ancient concept about main verb and participles. So main verb is a main verb. Participles are like helping verbs, auxiliary. And I'm a petrol head. Some call me a hoon, some call me a reform hoon. I know a number of you know my shameful history. When I was a parish minister, one time that the congregation actually had multiple rosters on the notice board, some for worship roster, some for other stuff, fetching elderly people to the church, and one for Sunny Chen because his driving license had just been suspended. We need people to drive him to the church. That was quite a long time ago, but not too long ago, I still remember early December. Some of you know that we have a property officer in the presbytery called Rob Nosko. So before Christmas, Rob Nosko and I drove to a Far East congregation here to visit them. And then we started the conversation. I was driving and I realized that Rob is also a petrol head. So we exchanged notes about our history, some glorious parts, some not so glorious. I was so happy to just talk to someone who truly understands what a hoon or reformed hoon society. After the visit, we had a long chat, and I dropped him off, and I was so happy and driving on Eastern Freeway. And not long after on the freeway, I saw again Christmas light behind me. It was a BMW, a police car. I don't want to tell you the rest of the story. You can just make some guess. So that's me. So I want to use a car as an analogy. I know some of you say, oh my gosh, like Sunny Chen, please. But I love cars. So look at the relationship between main verb and participle would be like an engine and wheels. So a main verb can work with one participle or two, like a motorbike. So you need to have an engine driving it. Or in Asia, you will see a lot of tricycle, motor tricycle. One engine driving three participle, three wheels. Of course, we all know about cars, one engine, four, or multiple. Main verb could work with like 5, 6, 7, 8 helping verbs called participles. Now, for those of you who are much more artistic, you hate this sort of a hoonish kind of analogy. So we do have participle in English because remember, English actually developed from ancient Latin and Greek. So what's that? In English, Our participle is basically ing. You add ing, behind the word going, eating, praying. One example, I present this. Present is a main verb. But then I can use an auxiliary verb using, Zoom. So using the participle is used not as a main action, but tell you a bit about more information. Like what, when, why, where, how. I present this. How? Using Zoom. How about Greek participle? Well, in Greek, there are 360 participles. When I was a student, we were given 2 weeks to memorize all of them. We nearly cried to death. So you can see how complex it is. Not just. Now, for those of you who love driving, like me, you know that there are front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, so that sort of stuff. The same. In English, you can put the participle behind the main verb, like I present this using Zoom. Or you can reverse the order, right? Using Zoom, I present this. In English, they mean exactly the same, but not in Greek. When you place a participle in the front or behind, it would change the meaning. All right, enough of this really boring bit. So let me get back to the real stuff that we are trying to get to about the church admission. Look at this long passage with all the red bits, all the main verbs. Which one is actually the main verb? Well, there's only one, which is make disciples. There are 3 auxiliary verbs: go, baptize, teaching. Obey and command is more subsidiary to teach, or teaching what? So in other words, it's kind of like a motor, a tricycle. One engine, make disciples, sort of 3, driving 3 wheels. So let me use the rest of the time to share with you the content or the understanding of this. So the engine, and then we have 3 wheels, so to speak. So what's the engine? Well, there's only one main command in the whole so-called Great Commission: make disciples. If you look at the grammar, it's actually an imperative main verb. Imperative means command. So it is a command. It's plural, meaning it's given not to one person, a group of people. So Jesus is giving a command to a group of people. The command is make disciples. Now for us, make disciples, the term is so religious. But in the first century, the word itself didn't carry any religious sense at all. So what did it mean? Well, I'll share it with you later on. I want to just move on to talk about the 3 helping verbs. First, the first one is go. The participle is placed in front of the main verb. Okay, and baptized and teach, they are placed behind the main verb. So remember this, so that's what I'm talking about. So let's talk about go. Now, the grammar is a participle, but is we call aorist plural participle. So I'm not going to bore you of all this really boring stuff. So when you place this kind of participle in front of a main verb, there is a function. It's called it would piggybacks the force of the main verb. So in this case, the main verb is a command. So as a result, go would carry the force of command. Go, like a command. Now, you have to be careful. It's not the main command. So what are you talking about, Sunny? It doesn't make sense. Well, basically, it's a prerequisite. In order to make disciples, the very command, you need to do this first. You must go first. Go is not the key. It's not the most important. But without going, forget about the main command. So you must go. So let me translate it in a way that it would make sense to us. So Jesus is basically saying to the disciple, first, as a prerequisite, you, group of people, must go. But go what? Well, you look at basically what we talked about early on. The 11 disciples went to Galilee. You remember the incident to the mountain? And Galilee is basically their hometown. So let me retranslate, this part. First, you must leave your hometown. Leave the place you are familiar with. Whenever I preach or share with people about this, I would paraphrase it in a metaphorical way. I think it's really about leaving our comfort zone. Before you do anything making disciples, you must leave your comfort zone. You must leave. So that's the prerequisite. I'm not so sure whether you guys are still awake. I hope so. So now look at the two participles placed behind. Both of them are present tense participles. Boring bit. So they are placed behind, the engine, so to speak. I love driving rear-wheel drive. I now have the opportunity to drive a number of cars. Some are front wheel, some are rear. They're very different. The only thing that many of you would know when driving a car, rear wheel, be very careful when you're raining. It's raining, it's slippery. You have to be very careful. So I was, in case you wonder, where are you, Sunny? Is that your home? Not my home. I'm at CTM. So I was driving to CTM and I was trying to speed a bit. I couldn't because it's so wet on the ground. So back to here, when you place the two participles behind the main verb, this is the nuance. They indicate result or purpose. Now, in layman's term, basically make disciples, there must be an intentional outcome, a result, or a particular purpose, intention. So first, I want to talk about the word baptize. Now, whenever you see the word baptize, oh, water baptism. That's not true, because baptism or baptize was not an English word. It wasn't. Look at the word baptizo. Beta, alpha, p, tau, iota, zeta, omega. But basically, early on, English people transcribed every single letter into English, B-A-P-T-I. So that's why we have the word baptize. It wasn't a word. So what's the meaning of baptizo in the 1st century? It means immerse. Immerse. You can immerse things in water, into anything. Immerse. So if I want to translate it, it basically means with the intention of immersing them. With the intention of immersing them. So make disciples, yes, but there's an intention to do what? Immersing them. Into what? Well, if you look at the text again, just look at it. It says baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Forgive me a bit of digression. Whenever I teach this passage to my students, I always say there is no word called Trinity in the Bible. It's a concept invented much later on. But if you ask me to find a passage kind of, not proof, kind of gearing towards that idea or concept, this is the best passage. Why? Because in Koine Greek, 1st century, the sentence violated Greek grammar. Because when you have three objects with the article the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the grammar dictated that in the 1st century, you must use plural names in the names of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. Strangely, it's not in the names, but rather name. I'm not saying that is a proof, to the concept of Trinity. I'm saying that is weird. It's a wrong grammar. So in our text, basically, I would just simply put this, immersing them into God. All right, I know that you find it very, very difficult and boring and but just we are coming to the end, so don't worry. All right, teach. That's pretty easy and straightforward. You read the passage. So with the intention of teaching them all my commands to obey, what I've commanded you. Okay, so we are coming to the very end. So I really want to talk about this word, make disciples. What does it mean? Or what did it mean in the 1st century? Now, even though you will say, oh, Greek, all of you know this word, all of you. You know why? If you look at the letters in this Greek word, the first letter is mu, that's our M. The second letter is alpha, that's our A. The third letter is theta, that's our TH. That's the word math. In fact, in the ancient world, whenever you see the word starting with math, it's always pointing to one concept, learning, learner. In classical Greek, and I don't know classical Greek, I know Koine Greek, mathematics, I heard, basically meant font of learnings. What an irony. I know some of you really don't like mathematics, but the word in classical Greek basically means font of learning. So what exactly is make disciples? Well, it's not about religion. This is the meaning of it. If I try to translate, it's very hard to translate. That's the command. You, plural, as group, must help these people to be my students. That's the key command. Okay. In order to do that, you must leave your hometown, leave your comfort zone. But you do this with an intention to immersing them into God and teaching them my teaching, my commands. But help who? So that's a big question. So this is the very last bit of my presentation. I'll show you how wrong our translation is, or many of our translation. This is from NRSV. You could read other English Bibles, and most of them are not so accurate because many of them would say all nations. I think one of you know that one of our congregations is Church of All Nations, in Calton. So all nations, but it's a wrong translation. It's just so wrong. Why? The phrase means all the, and the word is ethne. Ethne is plural. Ethnos, singular, means nation. Oh, Sunny, nations. That's correct. No. Every single time when this word appears in Matthew or other gospel, the translators never translate as nations. Rarely, some, not always. In fact, in the first century, when a Jewish person heard or read this word ethne, the person would have this response. It's a word carries so much negative connotation. It created disgust. That's how they will respond. So what does it mean? Gentiles. Now, imagine this. The whole gospel of Matthew built up with a very sympathetic to the Jewish community. Jesus, the King of the Jews. Oh, the Gentiles, don't go. All right? It would be sweet to the audience, bias towards Gentiles, some scholars would call that. And when they listen to the reading at the end of the whole story, it was like a bombshell to them because the very command Jesus giving to his followers, you must help those whom you despise, whom you find the outsiders to be my students. I think the audience was, oh no. All right. So it's quite a dramatic way to write a gospel. All right. So I want to conclude my presentation today. I actually translate the whole passage using paraphrasing and literal translation. Okay. So let me show you. This is not the best translation. I just want to show you what I came up with. The so-called Great Commission could be understood as such. Every authority in all domains was given to me. Therefore, first, you as a group must leave your comfort zone. Most importantly, you as a group must help the outsiders to become my students. That's the key command. With the following intentions: immersing them into God and teaching them to keep all my commands. And behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age. Now, the first lesson I learned about public speaking, or you can say the feedback, was trying to hide my legs. So next time when you see I'm standing on the stage or whatever, don't pay attention to my legs. I don't have pretty legs anyway. Just in case you see them shaking, that's Sunny Chen. But then the first lesson I learned from my junior high school teacher about definition and defining. Remember I told you, whenever you engage a topic, define the keywords. And strangely, many years later, when I was studying the seminary, doing church history, my professor taught us nearly the same thing, almost in verbatim. And this is what he said to our class. He said, you know what? One of the major challenges faced by many Christians throughout church history is this. We all use the same terms, but what they mean to you would be very different from what they mean to other people. For example, I can say Jesus is my Lord, and the person sitting next to me will say Amen. The issue though, my understanding of Jesus and my definition of the Lord could be vastly different from the person next to me. You follow me? So I want to reverse what I've learned from my junior high school teacher, to define the words. I want to conclude my whole presentation by doing the opposite. After studying the so-called Great Commission, now you have what you see on the screen. I want to give this a word to describe it. All right. So the word that came to my mind to really encapsulate what you are reading, what I'm trying to present to you, is basically this word that we all know, discipleship. To different people, discipleship would mean very different things. But I would define discipleship as what you see. Now, I've been in my role for more than 3 years. And actually, before I took up this role as a Presbytery minister, I was a chaplain. And before that, I was a parish minister. So I had many, many chances to visit many, many congregations and preaching, teaching, holding seminars, and visiting and listening, and so on and so forth. I actually would say this to all of us. I could be very honest and candid. I think one of the challenges that we are all facing, I'm not we as a presbytery, I'm talking about Uniting Church, many congregations across, is the matter of discipleship, or I would say the lack of. Part of the reasons why we are facing what we are facing today is very complex. And I think in part is really because discipleship wasn't really upheld or focused as much as we should have. Not that we haven't done it. I think we are trying our very best, but we have been. I think this is something that I really want to raise. Now, again, tonight's presentation, I want to open up a space for discussion. Not that this is the best definition or the best way to understand church admission, but I just want to provide you a platform, a space to later on discuss among ourselves about church admission. But what I'm going to do now is to allow you to see what the things that you could discuss later on, and then I'll open up before we break into groups. I want to show you the questions that you can explore later on, but I'll give you about 5 minutes or so that you could ask questions or comments about this particular presentation. So later on, when you are breaking into smaller groups, I want you to share your thoughts and reflections. Now, I don't want you to be dogmatic, If you find it very hard to share, so I have some guiding questions for you. Asking yourself, as a corporate, not individually, as a corporate, what is our comfort zones? Who are our Gentiles? And how significant is discipleship to us in reality, not conceptual? All right, so I want you to share among yourself. If you have thoughts and reflections, go ahead. But you say, I'm not so sure what to say. So these are some guiding questions you could discuss among yourselves. What was our comfort zones as a congregation, as a presbytery, or as a community? Who are our Gentiles, outsiders, maybe people we despised, or people who are not God's people, and how significant discipleship to us. I hope you are still there mentally. Maybe you are daydreaming, but I fully understand that after dinner is not a very good time. So I'll just open up for questions or comments about the presentation.
Thanks, Sunny. I don't think any of us could possibly have fallen asleep through that presentation at all. It was challenging and interesting and wonderful. Thank you so much, Sunny. So I'm going to open up for questions. And Meredith.
Thank you, Sunny. Far from being asleep. You have dissected this passage with great erudition. What do we know of the early hearers? Would they actually have been able to dissect it in the way that you have?
Thank you, Meredith. It's good to see you here. I would say yes, because this is really talk about hermeneutics, how to interpret a passage. And one of the ways, not the best way, is always trace back to what we call the historical and linguistic approach. You try to find out how the language was operated in that era so that we gain an understanding about how the ancient audience would perceive. So the thing that I shared with you, it might sound very complex, but for them, it's like natural. You know, so the grammar that I shared with you was the grammatical understanding in the 1st century. So that's pretty much how they understood, you know, the language. So I think basically they would get the idea. So yeah, a very simple answer to your question. So that's why we're trying to, up till today, you know, scholars, you know, trying to find out more about Greek grammar, how, you know, ancient literature being understood, so that we gain a better understanding about how they understood stuff. It's not how modern people would understand it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Meredith. Thanks, Sunny. I've got Chris Barnett next. Chris.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Sunny. Really appreciate what you had to share tonight. I think that's fantastic understanding of mission. Clearly, in practice, the word's used in lots and lots of different ways. So I think wouldn't it be great if, as a presbytery, we understood and used mission in the way that you've used it tonight. The question then becomes, what's the word we might want to use to describe all that other stuff, which currently many would call mission?
Thank you, Chris. I think, you know, as I said early on, this is only one particular angle.
Yeah.
And again, you look at how theology was or is being developed. One of the things that we learned definitely is, yes, text is very important, which, you know, I just shared with all of you. But church history and how theology or missiology being developed would be equally important. Now, I don't claim to be an expert of those areas, honestly. So I would say tonight is just one particular angle to approach the topic. And I would really be mindful to treat it as the best or the only or, you know, the most accurate way to understand it. I think far from it. But what I'm hoping, though, it opens up space so that people might be focusing on other areas, would come back to look, this might be something that we have overlooked, or we should focus more on, or we can work harder on, or we have already done a lot on. So I think this is how I would hope people would see it. So not the best angle, honestly. It's like any objects in the world, you approach from different angles, we'll see different things.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Sunny. Jeff Stone.
Yeah, I had a similar thought to Meredith, actually. I was wondering, of course, Jesus didn't speak in Greek, I guess. So I was wondering about in Aramaic, is the same sort of nuance as you were describing. And so how much of this is Luke's interpretation? And yeah. Excellent
question, Jeff. Exactly. You know, I always argue, especially when Jesus assumed historical sense, from a historical sense, was truly speaking to the disciples, especially those from Galilee, right? They would speak in Aramaic, which is a sister language of Hebrew. So if you look at from the Aramaic point of view or Hebrew point of view, the things that, you know, you just heard from me would be pretty much gone, you know. But I think the important bit about the text tonight is how the writer actually chose to use this particular way to convey to the audience. So this is again about hermeneutics, how you sort of approach a text. We're not trying to argue whether it's historical or not. We are trying to argue how the first audience would hear and would understand what it means to them. So I think it's very important to have this sort of fine definition. So in case, you know, it was a historical account, what actually being said would be quite a different way. And I think one example is good. As many of you know that, you know, during the Last Supper upper room discourse in John, for example, Jesus say love. You remember, you know, as the very key, the new commandment, you know, love one another. The Greek word is agapao, which is totally not about holy unconditional love. It's garbage anyway. It's so wrong. But I always argue, if you look at the word, so agapao or agape means the person who produces love, the quality of the person would actually create the quality of the love that you would taste. So if the person giving the love is a wonderful person, the love he or she creates or produces would be wonderful. If the person is really bad, the love that he or she produces will be bad. So we have John 3:16 and 19. For God so loved the world. All right. So agape or agapao. If God is wonderful, the love will be wonderful. Later on, John 3:19. But human loved darkness more than light. The same word, agape, agapao. It's nothing holy, nothing unconditional. So human, selfish, simple. The love they produce, equal. So I'm sorry, a bit long-winded. So the upper room discuss about love one another. There's a new command. You look at the Greek, it's found that it's not really a new command. The love command is found, in the Old Testament. But you look at the Aramaic, say, for example, it's fascinating. The word, in Aramaic, the love carries a connotation of blood bond. Blood bond. So almost saying you love one another as if your own family. All right. So this is a new commandment. It's not just loving, like, the neighbor. It's treating them as your family. So that's why I always argue, I haven't done research, later on when Christians call one another brothers and sisters. So I think partially could be deriving from that. So I just, sorry, a bit, long-winded. I'm just trying to say that it's quite fascinating to look at how language, operates. But tonight, when I present this, it's really about the text, the author writing to the Jewish community, and how they would perceive and understand the text.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Sunny. Erica.
Just a basic question to you, Sunny. What do you mean by discipleship in today's world?
Wow, it's really a $1 million question. I think one particular answer, which I have already shared with all of you, is basically stated in that particular passage. If I want to make it my personal application, that in order to engage mission as part of the church, I myself, together with other people, must leave our comfort zone. We need to reach out to the outsiders with the intention of teaching them, about Jesus, and his teaching. It's not just about doing good works, which is very important, and also immersing them in God, which is what I presented tonight. So this is how I would see one particular angle of mission or discipleship. Again, it's not the best or the most important one.
Okay, so we're going to have breakout room conversations now. Glenn.
Yeah, we talked about how mission understood as evangelism or initiation or evangelization, whatever term you want to use, is itself outside our comfort zone. That we've got a bad taste in our mouth about poor forms of evangelism. And a lot of you have heard me say this before, so right now you're probably rolling your eyes back in your head, but we're not comfortable with evangelism, so we're not going to do a very good job of it. So when we think about discipleship, we do have to be intentional about it. How do we find ways of calling people to faith in Jesus Christ? How do we welcome people into this wonderful community, this blessed community that we are a part of? If we love the church, and we say we do, why wouldn't we want others to love that same community? And the way to do that is to talk about Jesus and to talk about what he has done and what God has done in him. And even if you're a very progressive universalist and you're just convinced that everything's going to be reconciled to God in the end anyway, even so, you have good news to share, don't you? You've got a wonderful message to share with others. And sometimes it's just we're not intentional. And I was sharing at Mernda, which you see behind me here,
yes,
building, that we've only a group of 15 people, but everyone had assumed that everyone must be a member of the church because they've been around for so long. But when we actually did the audit, most people were not even members of the Uniting Church. So we simply put the question to this group of 15 people, would you like to become a member of the Uniting Church? And we laid out what the benefits of that would be. You could serve on our church council. You could be engaged in wider Uniting Church activities. And so we ended up with 9 new members simply because we asked the question. So sometimes it's just about being intentional. We get so comfortable with that same little group of people that we've traveled with for years. And we might assume, oh, they're members of our church, but they're not necessarily members. Now, I know there's a difference between evangelism and bringing people into membership. And that sounds like a bit of an in-house sort of, shift. But I think, again, this is a question of intentionality. How do we find new ways that are in keeping with our uniting church ethos, our uniting church DNA? We're not going to do it the same way as Pentecostals. We're not going to do it the same way, as the old-fashioned Methodists. We're not going to preach hellfire and brimstone sermons. No. But there have to be new ways to invite people to follow Jesus. And I think we need to explore that. Otherwise, our church is going to continue to be in decline.
Thanks, Glenn. Sorry?
Here endeth the lesson.
I was going to say, there's an easy question and comment for us all to, respond to. Other groups. Pat.
I'm probably going to get completely mixed up here, but rather than thinking of bringing people in, we were talking about what can we do for our communities outside the church, rather than saying, oh, we're doing all this nice stuff for you. You come into our church and you'll be blessed, or whatever you like to say. But it's more of a surrendering a different way of looking at what church is. Church is not actually in the building, but the church is out there. Now, don't ask me how that's going to happen, but that's where we were sort of thinking, and I thought that was a really interesting point. Rather than even looking at growing, there's a different way of being church.
Thanks, Pat. Others? I can see some of you sitting there going, oh, I think I'd like to say something on that, but Bruce, I knew someone would.
One of the things that we were talking about was the need to build relationships. In order to be able to share our faith with others, we need to build relationships with other people. And one of the experiences that I had, which I shared, was I did a course on building relationships, on building bridges, where it was run by a local Baptist church, but it was about communicating with other people and talking to people that we haven't met before, and giving us tools to use to open conversations with people. And at the end of this course, we went into the local shopping centre and we spent 2 hours, we prayed before we went out, and we spent 2 hours just talking to people that we hadn't met before. And it was a great experience, actually, starting conversations with people. And I will always remember the very last conversation that I had that night was with a chap in Aldi who had a shopping basket with a couple of pot plants in it. And I started talking to him about the pot plants in his shopping basket. And the conversation went on, and he said, I'm starting to feel my mortality. And I said, well, I'm a Christian. I'm not afraid of dying. And then it opened up the conversation. I ended up praying for him before he left Aldi, and he was interested in the possibility of coming to church. Well, he didn't actually come to church, but it sows seeds by starting with conversations. It shouldn't be about getting people with backsides on seats. It's about building the kingdom. And the way we do that, I think the best way we can do it is to try and build relationships with other people. And then you've got something to start with that you can then start to talk about some of those other things which are important to us, such as our Christian faith. So we talked a little bit about building relationships and getting out of our comfort zones in order to do that.
Yep, absolutely. It reminds me of the, invite someone to a cup of tea, have a cuppa, sit and have a chat over a cuppa. Are there other groups that would like to feedback? Everyone's being very quiet. It's not just me that's losing my voice. Ingeborg, did you want to say something? You've unmuted.
Yeah, I can't find the hands. That's my problem.
That's fine. I saw that you unmuted. Go for it.
Pat spoke. I'm from Tacoma, up in the hills, and similar things, being visible in the community, being seen as a group from the church. There, you know, presenting yourself and inviting people to come if they wanted to, and doing things for the community. They're all things that, because that kind of make people interested. I go, oh, that's that church over there. Yeah, I do. And that builds conversations within the community. And I just, you know, and as one of the people said, that in the census that lots of people don't put religion in anymore. And I keep putting my finger over the thing. And also lots of families, their younger generation, especially in my family, they are all brought up in the church, but they don't go anymore. They have no intentions of going, even when mum goes all the time. Yeah, it's, I don't know, I'm confused, and I just think that if you do discipleship and do it with a bit of pressure, you're not going to win anything anyway. It's a bit like the person who before said evangelism, and that puts barriers up straight away with a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a word that we need to redefine ourselves, I think.
Yeah.
Glenn's spoken a bit about that, and I've taken that to heart as well. It's an interesting conversation, is it? Talking about, you know, helping that we must help the outsiders to become my students with the intention of immersing them into God. Doesn't necessarily mean turning up to church at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, does it?
No.
So
No.
Are there other comments, other questions, other comments or feedback from your group you'd like to share? Anyone else? Oh, yes, I've got Robert Evans. Sorry, Dale, I'll come to you in a second. I just saw Robert Evans' waving hand, but you'll need to unmute. It's not Robert, I'm assuming it's...
No, it's Annabelle.
Hi, Annabelle, sorry. Go for it.
I think having a presence in the community is really important. It's very difficult to do in many ways, but during COVID, during the lockdowns, one of our young families at the Avenue, from the Avenue in Blackburn, we decorated the outside of the church, and I was involved in the project. So we actually got many of the shut-in oldies to do lots of the decorations, but it was when we were putting it up and actually assembling it onto the outside of the building that we had so many conversations of people walking by, and as it scrolled through, we must have done about 6 or 8 different presentations in different ways. And it was just heartwarming to hear people's comments and people would stop me in the street. They knew I went to the Avenue, but you know, they weren't involved. I love what you're doing and sending messages of hope. For us, that really, it was very heartwarming to know that a strong message of hope and love and care and support was being sent out to the on the outside of the building. It's not about the inside of the building that matters. And at the Avenue, we're struggling with, we have excess buildings or buildings that are underutilised, and struggling with that aspect. But just having that, being able to offer opportunities for a presence within a community. I mean, I'm involved in a Together in Music for children, preschool age children to school age, and there's a play group, and having those opportunities wherever we can is just vitally important, and that just speaks volumes of the love of God out in the community. And I know it offers opportunities of the deeper conversation, but we're not there to preach, or we just have that presence and that care for people there. So anyway, enough of that.
Thanks, Annabelle. The relational sort of aspect of it. Dale.
Community's been an interesting space for us with mission. As a church, we've renovated our building and devoted ourselves to hospitality as our involvement in community. But we're a joint Uniting Church Salvation Army church. That's not outspoken, but that's the reality. We absorbed the Salvation Army church when they closed. So a non-drinking or strong stance on non-drinking in a community where the largest business in the community is a gin distillery and every second person is a winemaker. We're also a logging town. So the challenges that exist between our Christian stance, our gym units focus on environment and justice, very much Aboriginal community, probably the highest proportion of Aboriginal people in Victoria in a small town. There are lots of contradictions in involvement, mission, that provide unique challenges when you're in a semi-rural setting. No answers, just part of the challenge of mission and social justice and how we fit in our community as Christian people.
Take into account everything in the community. Yeah, thanks, Dale. Paul Chandler.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I jumped out of my small group prematurely, so my apologies to them, and perhaps for not picking up everything that was said in the dying minute. But one of the things which I think we were pointing in the direction of was asking about who is empowered, who is gifted to provide leadership of a community looking to do different things, and the role of the minister or deacon or ordained person in that sort of mix, and the conundrum that a number have experienced around churches which have got property but perhaps declining numbers, numerical numbers in the congregation, and the issue of you tend to lose your minister before you lose your buildings, and isn't that backwards? So how do we grapple as a church with that sort of structural reality and continue to invest well in local communities doing strong and interesting mission?
Thanks, Paul. So I'm just quickly writing that note. It's a really interesting one. And probably last one, Frederick Benbow.
Yeah. Following on from Paul's comment, and Paul, you weren't missed. We were able to talk without you in our group. My comment is, and I would like to know, is there anywhere in the presbytery where we've got a congregation that is not bound down by buildings? Is there anyone here is there any congregation who stepped out away from buildings and decided to go on their own?
So who have we got? We've got Lilydale is one of them.
I would just like to hear their experience, because I find the buildings and the whole operational side of church actually consumes all our time. And there's, in terms of mission, I just hope someone else is doing it, because I'm not.
Yeah, buildings can be, especially with all the regulatory and governance required now with essential safety measures and health and safety and all that, buildings can be that yoke around our necks that do actually stop us from doing mission. Okay, Alan, you can be the last one. Don't worry, I'm taking a long time to unmute myself as well.
Yeah, I'm Alan McKenzie from Croydon North. We are in a privileged position that Uniting have beneficial use of our property. We don't own the property. We get a beneficial grant from Uniting to use the building, and so we have a worship space allocated to us in the community centre, but we don't have to worry about rental, paying rates and all that sort of stuff, and insurance and that, which, considering we are a very small congregation, not having to deal with all those other property-based issues makes it a lot easier to be able to do mission, etc.
Thanks, Alan. That's really helpful. For those who are also interested in the question that was asked, then the Money for Mission program, Money for Mission Fund, there's some videos on the VicTas Uniting Church website that actually shows some congregations that have sold properties and how they're doing church differently. So if you want to follow that through a bit and have a look a bit deeper, there are some videos on there as well. And I think if you haven't joined up to Matt Harry's emails as well from ELM, he also does throw some really curly and difficult questions out there, which sometimes are a bit terrifying too. But there is some further information that might be available. Frederick, if you can't find it, shoot me an email and I'll send you some links. So thank you everyone for your feeding back and after your breakout rooms. I hope you found that conversation really helpful. Certainly, I know that the presentation that Sunny did was absolutely fabulous. And again, thank you. And we are so blessed to have such a fabulous resource as we do in Rev Dr Sunny Chen, providing us with these thought-provoking presentations. So thank you, Sunny. And I think I'm handing back to you for a little bit, Sunny, aren't I? Excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson. So I want to conclude tonight by sharing with you some events. Even though my role is called Presbytery Minister Congregations, but actually half of my role is called the ELM, or Equipping Leadership for Mission, as part of the Synod unit. And the fundamental responsibility is to resource our people. So I want to share with you a project that I've been working with Craig Mitchell, who is also our ELM PM at Port Phillip East. So this is a partnership between the two presbyteries. And what we are trying to do is to reach out and to support those who are actually doing some new initiatives, talking about mission. So there are a number of events that we are trying to hold, and I want to share with you some of these events. So first of all, I want to share with you a 30-second video. Basically, it's with words, not really a lot of graphic. And then I'll explain to you a few events that we're going to run. And at the end of tonight, or maybe tomorrow, I'll gather all your email addresses and I'll send you the link. Then you could actually have a look. And then if you want to register, you can do it too. So I'm going to share screen so that you could see what I want to share with you. So basically, as I said, we are seeking the following people, and in particular, we want to support and just journey with them along the way. So if you or you know someone, congregation ministers or lay leaders or lay people, doesn't matter. If you're truly wanting to either starting or already you are doing it, we want to offer some support and resources. So we have organized the following events. I want to share with you a few. First of all, we do have a seminar at the end of August and early September. We have invited Steve Taylor, a very experienced person in this area, to share with us, his insights. And for those who are more into a conversation, we are actually organizing a pub conversation, which is located in Richmond. So this is another event I want to share with you. And at the same time, we have ordered only 15 books, but we are wanting to start a small book club so that you could share and read and really find your comrades, so to speak. So what I'm going to do, these are the events I want to promote, and I'm going to send you all an email with the link, and then you can just use the link to access to all the details. And again, it would be a great opportunity for those who are thinking about starting some new initiative or pioneering ministry, or who are already doing it and seeking some support. So that's what I want to share with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sunny. So those that are doing something, thinking about it, or don't even know where to start thinking, possibly as well, for some of us maybe too. Wonderful. So you get all those dates in that email tomorrow from Sunny. So thank you